Okay, let's get started. Airway is everything. 5 signs your kid may not be getting enough oxygen. I think these signs are going to surprise you a little bit. So I've asked my good friend, Annie, she's going to tell you all about herself, to walk us through this because she's a certified oral facial myologist and more. But I'll tell you what, Anne, will you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Because I've known you for years. I could chat about you forever. You go ahead. Give them your bio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a speech language pathologist. I graduated from the University of Toronto, and I moved to Colorado and began working in the schools, and then quickly moved to a private practice. And at one point, I had a client who had some funky speech things going on, and she just had a very forward tongue rest posture. And I knew it was something I didn't know anything about. I hadn't been trained in that in school. And so I found in our area, we had a real gem, an oral facial myologist named Patricia Grant. And I reached out to her and I took my client to her, and I was fascinated. I handed my client over to Patricia. She did really well. And about 2 years later, I got a call from Patricia asking me if I'd be interested in buying her practice because she was moving away. And so that began my journey into facial myofunctional therapy. It's been a really cool ride. And every day I learn something new. To me, it seems like the mouth tells a story, and every person's mouth tells a different story. And you can look at teeth and wonder, I wonder why they fit together in that way.
Yeah.
And then you would look at the tongue and say, well, it's forward, but I wonder why it's forward. What's making it sit forward? It's not going to just sit forward on its own. Is there an airway problem? Is there a long-standing digit sucking habit? Why is it forward? And you can look at the palate and it's super arched and narrow and you wonder why. And it just goes on. And it's a real privilege to work with people because they often come to help with their tongue. And when you look at the tongue, you realize that there might be some really big issues that are going to impact their overall life. And that's where it comes down to airway.
You just said that so well. It impacts your whole life. And when I met look at me, I'm trying to point. When I met my pal Trevor, I was like, oh, we got to connect you with my friend Annie because she understands about airway. So can you tell us just a tiny bit about Trevor, and then we're going to jump into 5 signs that your kid may not be getting enough oxygen.
Sure. Trevor's amazing.
Yeah.
He's one of the fastest learners I've ever met, and he has a very supportive mom.
Yeah.
Trevor came because he had an open mouth posture. People were wondering about a tongue tie, and he really came to me because there were questions about a tongue tie. And I started to look at that, and I actually wondered about room in his palate for his tongue. If he released his tongue, would there be room in his palate for it? And I also saw that he had really great potential to make changes even without a tongue tie release. So we began myofunctional therapy as the first step, and he astounded me with how quickly he made changes. You can see
working very hard.
He has his lips closed, he's breathing through his nose. That's a big change. And tongue tie release is likely in his future, as is expansion, but myofunctional therapy has made a big difference for him.
It has definitely made a big difference. Trevor, are you having fun with Miss Annie? Good, good. We're going to have you do a little tips and tricks for us here in just a minute, but I wanted to ask Anne, so when I first met Trevor and other kids that I've sent your way, one of my biggest concerns is, are they sleeping well? Because a lot of kids, if they're not sleeping well, they're not getting good oxygen. Can you just talk a little bit about that, about snoring, daytime fatigue, etc.?
Yeah, like I said, people come to me for the tongue, and the tongue is sitting forward, and what is it doing to their teeth? But then when you start to ask simple questions about sleep, are you snoring? Yes. Do you get tired during the day? Yes. Do you sometimes have problems with attention? I don't think that was Trevor's case, but often people say yes. So it's a delving into that piece.
And how does that relate to your earlier comment then about an open mouth posture? And for the parents listening, could you explain what an open mouth posture really is? And I've got my throat scope here if you need me to demonstrate while you're talking too.
Sure. So when I'm looking at a child, first thing I'm noticing when they walk in the waiting room is what do they look like when they're relaxed? Is the mouth drooping open a little bit? Is it open just even a couple millimeters? Are the lips puffy? Close their mouth. Is there sort of a golf ball look here? Is it hard for them to close their lips? So I'm looking at that open mouth posture. What does that look like? And it leads to a whole series of questions then. What does the tongue look like when the mouth is open? Most often I see it as a bottom dweller, living on the bottom.
I feel like, tell me if this is true, I feel like where the jaw goes, the tongue goes.
Absolutely. And where the tongue goes, the jaw goes in growth. So that's really important for people to understand that facial growth is actually being changed by mouth breathing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jump in anytime as I'm asking you questions if you think Trevor would be helpful to demonstrate some of this, but I also wanted to ask you a little bit how the relationship between a narrow palate and that tongue resting posture, because you mentioned that earlier, that one of the things we saw with T was that he had a relatively high narrow palate. We wondered about that tongue tie element, but we were thinking, do we release right away? Because we got to have room up in that palate for the tongue to rest up there and do its job. Can you kind of speak to what that tongue's job is in relationship to the palate?
Well, I've heard you speak in other Facebook Lives, and you've talked about form and function, and they're so inextricably linked, form and function. And often when a tongue lies low, the palate doesn't benefit from the shaping of the tongue. And so the tongue might be low because the person is having difficulty breathing. So the tongue isn't there to mold the palate.
If I can just demonstrate for everybody, I'm going to move a little closer to the camera. If my tongue is a little bit more forward, it's not up on that hard palate, especially when we swallow. We want our tongue to squish up there, essentially. What sorts of things are you doing with Mr. Trevor to, I mean, I haven't seen Trevor in months since you started working with him. Buddy, you are doing amazing. Your lips are closed. Your eyes are bright. You're as smart and handsome as ever. But show me some of the things that the two of you have been doing to just work on this concept of lip closure and tongue resting posture.
So I think, Trevor, we could start by you showing off how your tongue now sticks to the roof of your mouth. Because when I met you, it didn't do that. And now you have this fantastic seal, and we call them caves. His tongue is incredibly defined around the frenum. So why don't you show that off? Show off your tongue pop.
Can't wait to see.
Tongue pop. I think it'll be better without the light. Give the light is cool. So 1, 2, 3, pop. 2, 2, 3.
You see that incredible seal?
That's amazing.
Amazing. And Trevor has built that into a really strong knowledge of where the tongue tip should rest. Can you show people where the tongue tip should rest, Trevor?
Hey, Trevor, go ahead and put your blade on there, and then we'll really be able to see well. Because on the throat scope, the light source actually beams through the blade, kind of like a lightsaber. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sorry, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, Trev, show us where the tongue tip should rest. So open up your mouth and show where your tongue is resting.
Show them the spot.
That throat scope lights up so well. All I can see is light. I think go ahead, yeah, just show us without.
There we go. And now close your mouth down and show us how your tongue is sitting right there. Perfect. And you feel the sides of your tongue against your molars, and your tongue is up there, right? It's helping to form that palate.
Mhm.
And if you have an expander, your tongue is going to be up, helping the expander.
That's fantastic. And how, now I'm trying to remember, were large tonsils an issue here?
They are medium-sized tonsils, and we're going to kind of take a look and see if they are playing a role. They haven't to date because they've been medium, but we're going to take a look at that as part of the whole process.
And Trevor has a history of large adenoids, and those were removed. So that is part of his history and probably part of the reason why he has the forward tongue rest posture and the high arch palate.
Annie, just explain that a little bit more for parents listening. Explain where your adenoid tissue is and why that might push your tongue forward when it comes to trying to get oxygen.
Adenoid tissue is up in the sinus area, and they can be large just like tonsils are large. They're sized like tonsils. And when they're large, that's where you're going to find open mouth posture, forward tongue, trying to help you breathe. And you're also probably going to hear reports of apnea or snoring.
And the adenoid tissue can actually affect the soft palate as well if it's large enough, correct? Let me just show, because I know we have a lot of parents tuning in. Let me just show an example. It's a little bit hard for me to talk and do it at the same time, but I'm going to try to actually show you my soft palate. Ah, ah. See how it raises up in the back? If you have a lot of adenoid tissue, holding that down, essentially stopping that, the soft palate has a hard time making good contact. And because of that, that tongue will go more forward because we're just trying to get oxygen in. So Trevor's a great case in that because he actually had that adenoid tissue removed when he was younger. And Annie, what about, can we just visit a little bit about the tongue tie and then show us anything more that this amazing kid has learned to do? But can you explain to everybody what a tongue tie actually is and how it can vary?
Sure, yeah. I don't think tongue tie is something that we think of a lot. Sometimes we even can't believe that that truly exists. Tongue tie is just mumbling over your words. But tongue tie does exist. It refers to the frenum, the lingual frenum, the attachment under the tongue. It's not a black and white issue. You're not either tongue-tied or not tongue-tied. It's rather a gradient. And we're really looking at the function. What is the restriction of the tongue meaning for that person? So the first thing that tongue tie would impact would be breastfeeding, then feeding of solid foods, and speech development. But in a case like Trevor's, it's also possibly impacting a low forward sitting tongue that's then impacting the dentofacial growth.
So I just want to make it really clear to everybody, it doesn't mean that ankylosing or a tongue tie always affects all those things. We really look at the whole child. And, you know, Trevor has amazing articulation, so it didn't affect his speech. And I've certainly met babies, not at all to contradict you, Annie, to agree with you. I've definitely met babies who were great breastfeeders, but then they had trouble with solid foods. Turns out they had a really wicked tongue tie. It's just that their mother had just right breast shape for that little kid's mouth and maybe a strong letdown, and it all worked out fine. So as kids grow and develop, especially when it comes to facial development, that really tight tethered tissue under the tongue can influence the way the jaw grows, the way the tongue rests, and those two interplay with each other. And of course, oxygen. So, Annie, go ahead. I can tell you want to say something.
No, I just completely agree with you, especially about oxygen.
Oxygen is everything. Everything. What else would you like to share with Trevor before we start taking questions?
Well, I think I'd like to share something a little bit more about mouth breathing, and maybe Trevor would, maybe he hasn't known this, but Trevor, do you know that by learning to breathe through your nose, you've helped yourself even be a better athlete? There's a really interesting phenomenon called the Bohr effect. And there's an interesting combination of an interplay between carbon dioxide and oxygen in our bodies. And when we mouth breathe, we're really essentially over breathing and changing that ratio. So Trevor, you've even helped yourself in that area.
That's cool.
As far as showing us more things,
yeah.
What would you like to show, Trevor?
What do you want to show? You want to do kiss the cup?
Can you show how you've moved that seal into a new swallow?
You do kiss the cup. Okay, he's going to do the kiss the cup.
No. So
he's putting an elastic in to hold his tongue.
An elastic is a tiny little rubber band.
I can see it. You're doing a great job.
So the forward tongue rest posture is the most important thing for Trevor, but when he moves forward, the swallowing pattern is often changed. And so we've worked through the swallowing pattern as well.
Now, wait a second. Did he just swallow a rubber band? What's happening?
One. I don't swallow.
Did you swallow the rubber band, Trevor?
No, right here.
Honey, Trevor, tell us what you're doing. I can't quite see. You've got this little rubber band. You're putting it in your mouth, but where is it going?
So I've developed that I can swallow while the tip of my tongue is still touching my palate. So I will push that rubber band up against the palate with my tongue, and that will lock it there. So when I swallow, the rubber band doesn't come down. And that doesn't mean you're never going to swallow a rubber band. And that does not mean because I have swallowed an elastic before. Not very often.
Well, what I don't understand, actually I do understand, but what I want everybody else to understand is, Annie, why is that important that he learns to put his tongue tip on that spot? What does it have to do with a mature swallow pattern?
His older pattern, the pattern he came with, was a tongue low and forward. It wasn't holding the water, it wasn't trapping the water, it wasn't sealing up against the palate. And it was just all part of his pattern of a low forward tongue.
Yeah.
He hadn't learned that. So we've trained that, and we've used the elastic to give him more feedback. And
that's fantastic.
He understands it completely.
So for everybody listening, babies at about 1 year of age begin to develop this more mature swallow pattern. Before that, babies swallow like this, with their tongue forward, not necessarily past their teeth, but forward. And that anterior posterior movement slowly begins to change as long as the babies are breathing well and they're not using too many bottles, pacifiers, sippy cups, etc., to that tongue tip to what we call the spot, which is where the rubber band is going. And that's where we say a D or a T, and we push there and we swallow like this. Easy. Anything else that you want to show with Trevor?
Anything else you want to say?
Would you like to show how that moves into pudding, Trevor? I know you're a little bit fond of that pudding.
You want to try the pudding? Okay.
So Trevor's also developed a better tongue groove, a better tongue bowl. He had a strong gag when he began to work with me. We've worked through his tongue bowl. He was excellent. When I first asked him to describe what a spoon felt like on his tongue, he said, "It just kicks the spoon out.
Oh.
My tongue kicks my spoon out." And now his tongue has developed a nice tongue bowl response, and he's changed that. So you could show that off, Trevor, if you want. There's his seal.
Smile, swallow, and then close mouth, swallow. Nice.
Awesome.
This is a great exercise because he gets to eat pudding. Okay, make sure it goes in. Bowl. Right down. Smile, swallow, close mouth, second swallow. Really good.
That's so great. Annie, with the, right now we're all doing so much telehealth. How much have you been doing with Trevor via telehealth, and how much did you get to see him in person?
Daniel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about half and half. We've done
about half and half.
We've done a good amount on telehealth. Telehealth has been excellent.
Fantastic.
Trevor,
Go ahead, Danielle.
I was going to say it's been really good, and he sleeps a little better. So he had some darker circles under his eyes, which was always a sign that he wasn't really getting enough quality sleep or oxygen when he's sleeping. And that's definitely improved since we've been doing this.
I can see the difference because I was over at your house. Oh gosh, I think it was like in February maybe. And that was why I said, hey, we got to hook up with Annie here, and then I'll come back and we'll work together later on. And the difference, Trevor, in your eyes and your handsome face, man, you are just one handsome dude. You always have been, but you just look so bright and perky. I'm so proud of you for working so hard. Is there anything else you want to show us before I have you say goodbye? Or is there anything you want to say to the people listening? There are people all over the world listening to you right now, Trevor. Is there anything special you want to tell them?
The thing about the pudding is, so if this cup is a house, so Mr. Light lives in the house. He wants to see Mr. Stick. He's coming along. What you don't want your tongue to do is shove out the doormat in his face.
Perfect, Trevor.
You want Mr. Stick to come in the house.
You listen, buddy, I could not have said that better. You are amazing. You're amazing. What are you going to be when you grow up?
Probably a writer.
Yeah, I can see that about you. You can be anything you want to be because you're just amazing. I love you so much. Well, you know what? We're going to be taking some questions here in a minute. So I think what we'll do is let you get back to your family, Trevor. Danielle, thank you for sharing your wonderful son with us.
Thanks for having us.
Again. And Annie and I will take it from here. Trevor, you're amazing. I know everybody's going to comment right now. Talk about how amazing you are.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, Trevor.
Oh my goodness. That I can't even stand it. He's so great. He's just the best. Well, you know what? I know we're going to have a lot of questions here, but I did want to mention for everyone, if you tuned into one of my recent Facebook Lives, then you know that ThroatScope just came out with a brand new product. Annie and I have been talking about it. We're so excited about it, called the Telescope. It's so new. I don't even have one yet. But in short, what it is, I want you to think about this for telehealth, is you're going to take your smartphone. In this case, maybe Danielle would have one, Trevor's mom. And then your ThroatScope, your light up tongue depressor, actually attaches to your cell phone, to your smartphone. And there's an app that is part of the package. And then what you're going to be able to do is, imagine this, is you're going to be able to put the light up tongue depressor into your child's mouth and actually beam the pictures to your doctor or to Annie. And we can measure the size of the tonsils every day. If little Trevor happens to have a sore throat, they can let the pediatrician know that and send pictures of the throat and how red it really is. And could this be strep? You know, it's amazing. So you can find out more about that on throatscope.com. And we actually have someone with us tonight from ThroatScope, and they'll probably be putting in some links for all of you about that new product. We're going to feature it again here real soon, but it just came out last week, and I wanted to let everybody know about it. So Annie, anything else you want to say before we start taking questions?
No, I think we've covered it. Let's go
I think
ahead.
you're ready to go? Because you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to pop the questions right up here on the screen. And hey, I'm just going to tell you, Belinda Campbell said, hello to the lovely Anne, who is such a perfect collaborator. I am so fortunate to work with you. She's the best. That was so nice.
Belinda.
You know who else?
With you.
Oh, she's the best. And you know who else is here, by the way, is Erin Geddes. And Erin's going to be a special guest as well, because she's also a certified oral facial myologist like you here in Colorado. And you've met Erin before. So that'll be fantastic. And Erin's at gettystherapies.com if anybody would love to know about that. So let's go ahead and take our first question. It's from Casey, and she says, What's the youngest age you would suggest to use the rubber band to work on swallowing? Great question.
Okay, so yeah, Trevor was very enthusiastic about the rubber band, but that came after a lot of work and a lot of caution on my part and confidence that he could handle that, and that the rubber band would be important to him, that it would give him important feedback. You can definitely teach a new swallow without a rubber band. And keep in mind also that the swallow is second to the rest posture. Where the tongue rests is the most important. So looking at that, where your child's tongue rests and how their lips rest, how their body posture is. Are they slumped? Is the mouth drooping open? Those are all more important to look at than the tongue rest in the swallow.
And I really want to share with everybody that Annie has extensive training in this, and it's a big bulk of your practice. You're the one I've been referring to here in Boulder for a long, long time. And not only that, but I know I took this training 10 years ago, and Annie and I both took it again last fall because we just want to get a refresher. And it's a 4-day introductory course, and then there's more beyond that. But Annie is certified. I'm not. I'm busy with other things. So when I have a child who needs orofacial myology treatment, I send them to Erin down in the Castle Rock area or to Annie. So I can't stress enough that this requires very specialized training. I want to share too that Elise is here. I mean, this is a long question. You may not be able to see it all, Annie. I'll just read it. But she says, my daughter is supposed to finally start orofacial myofunctional therapy via telehealth soon. Should she, as a mom, purchase a throat scope to help with that? Also, is there a high prevalence or correlation between open mouth, forward tongue, and sleep apnea? I'll answer the throat scope question, and I'd love for you to take the second part about sleep apnea, open mouth, forward tongue posture. Elisa, it's really up to you, but I have to say that once I started using throat scopes, I'll never go back. I don't even buy wooden tongue depressors anymore because this just helps the child. They're so much more comfortable. It's a fairy wand. It's a laser beam, you know. It's really up to you, but you'll see on the Throat Scope website that everything is priced very reasonably. And I know that Casey from Throat Scope will chime in here and give you some more information. Annie, tell us a little bit about the relationship between open mouth, forward tongue, and sleep apnea.
Sure. So when I see a forward tongue and an open mouth, it makes me question why. And airway is one of the answers. There can also be a connection with a long-standing digit sucking habit that would also draw a tongue forward. There are other reasons as well. But airway would be a big question in my mind. And I would probably refer for evaluation to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And as part of that, request a sleep study. And from there, determine, is there apnea? But you as a parent would also be able to report what you hear.
Yeah.
Heard apneic moments. And if you have, you should pursue it.
Elise had a second part to her question. She said, apologies, thought of an additional question. Would you recommend using an orthodontic, quote, tongue cage as well as therapy used together? And I just want you to be honest about this.
Well, there's a long history in myofunctional therapy of trying to train the tongue, to train the 6 muscles in the tongue to work as they should. In parallel with that, the orthodontic community has also recognized the impact of the tongue and has developed different devices to put the tongue back in the place where it should be. I really strongly believe that myofunctional therapy should be the first step because you have muscles that you can train that are sitting and not doing their job, and they can be trained to do their job rather than being forced. It's not to say that tongue cages are not sometimes useful, but I don't think that they're the first step at all.
I agree with that. And on that same note, Dawn Marie says, is an ENT or an otolaryngologist a good place to start if you have concerns about a 5-year-old with some mouth breathing and large tonsil size and a child not getting quality sleep? My 5-year-old daughter, who I think is pictured there, what a cute family. My 5-year-old daughter sleeps 11 to 13 hours each night and still wakes up tired with deep, dark circles under her eyes. No forward tongue posture, but occasional snoring at night too. Any thoughts on that? Where's your detective hat on that, Annie?
I think an ear, nose, and throat evaluation is definitely warranted there. And there's going to be a lot of reporting as a parent and what you're hearing and seeing. And then I would couple that with a myofunctional evaluation. There might be things that you can change that are part of behavior, but you need to have a basis of an ear, nose, and throat evaluation.
Fantastic. I'm trying to put Mandy's question up here, but I'm having a little trouble for some reason. I'm just going to read it out loud. Mandy wanted to know suggestions for using the throat scope with a child who might bite, because especially if we're working with a child, say with spastic quadriplegia or CP, etc., sometimes those reflexes take over. And just like we have to be careful with our fingers near their mouth, they can often bite the tools that we're putting in their mouth. So Mandy, I just wanted to offer a suggestion there. What I typically do with kids like that, and it does take some practice, I would recommend practicing on a colleague. But rather than coming in this way, over the teeth in any way, I come from the side and watch. And I actually pull the cheek out if possible. I may provide a little bit of stabilization here. Another thing you can do is actually go, it's hard to talk and demonstrate. Let me show you. And lift up here, or start here and pull out. And then you're never between the two teeth, between the upper jaw and the lower jaw, and use your hand to help that stabilization there. So great question, really good question. Let's see if anybody else has it. Oh, you know what? Mary has a great one here. How do you get started in orofacial myology? Well, you had a unique situation because you actually bought a practice and got trained by the owner of the practice. But typically, there are several different organizations that will train you. Both Annie and I attended, as did Erin, the International Association of Orofacial Myology, their initial training course. And then there's lots of internship opportunities, learning opportunities. I'm trying to think of the right word for it, where you're actually practicing these and you have a supervisor and then they actually test you. So that's why I'm not certified. I don't have that additional time with a supervisor, but definitely Erin down in Castle Rock, Colorado, and Annie have all of that experience, which is why I always refer to them. But I don't know, any other ideas?
Well, you'll know that people have that training if they have the COM behind their name.
You want somebody with the COM behind their name. And the International Association of Orofacial Myology will accept speech language pathologists and dental hygienists. Is that correct, Annie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, super. I love the fact that SLPs, though, because we already have the background in terms of speech and language and feeding. So, you know, I have to admit, I'm a tiny bit prejudiced on that, but you're an SLP, Erin's an SLP. That's just where I tend to refer to, not knocking anybody else who's taken this training, but I'm an SLP, so you're my people.
And myofunctional therapy is a perfect foundation for speech therapy.
For sure. Alrighty, I'm going to just double check that we don't have any more questions here. But I also wanted to say that Annie's going to be joining me again. I'll have the date in the future with, hopefully, we'll see, another client. We're going to be talking about surprising issues around thumb sucking. And Erin is also going to be joining me in the near future. So always make sure that you're on my mailing list at melaniepotock.com and on the throatscope.com's mailing list, because we'll let you know when these special events happen. And then finally, I always include these on my YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to Melanie Potock's YouTube channel and you'll get this video in your email inbox the next day, as well as others. Let's see, I think, looks like, I think we are good. I think we've got everybody. Annie, I can't thank you enough for doing this with me. But you were awesome, but I'm sorry, Trevor pretty much stole the show. He's the best. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on a Thursday night on the ThroatScope page. Remember to take a look at their website, throatscope.com. Check out their new product, Telescope. And I'll see you this Monday night on Melanie Potock, My Munchbugs Facebook page for another event. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.